was simple: never rob your supplier. In the underworld, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was suicide. But on a quiet morning in May 2020, 3 men decided the reward was worth the risk. Their target, a stash house controlled by one of Liverpool's most dangerous criminal firms. Inside, £1 million worth of cocaine. The van rolled up to Croxteth Road, West, its occupants hidden behind masks and hoodies. Among them were Jason and Craig Cox, high-level dealers with a reputation for violence, and their associate Richard Caswell, a man who'd already served time for car bombings. The fourth, Benjamin Monk, played his part perfectly. Dressed as a delivery driver, parcel in hand, he rang the doorbell. Then, chaos. The door swung open, and the machete came down. A father and son inside barely had time to react before the gang forced their way in. Blades flashing, blood splattered the walls as the men were dragged through the house, begging for their lives. "Where's the gear?" the gang demanded. The answer came in gasps. Under the stairs. Minutes later, the van sped away, its cargo now 3 heavy sports bags packed with 30 kilos of cocaine. Behind them, the son's frantic 999 call pierced the silence. They just came in stabbing, Dad's bleeding out. Police arrived to a scene straight out of a nightmare. The father's arm was slashed to the bone, his survival hanging on the arrival of an ambulance that, by sheer luck, was already nearby. Yet, as detectives surveyed the carnage, they knew this was no ordinary home invasion. The press would call it a violent burglary, another sign of rising crime. But the truth was far darker. This was a hit on a major criminal operation, and the men responsible had just made enemies who didn't believe in prisons. They planned everything, except for one mistake. The mask Monk dropped on the floor, and the police were already watching. The van disappeared into the back streets of Liverpool, its occupants riding an adrenaline high. They had done the unthinkable, robbed their own suppliers, and lived to tell the tale. But survival was just the first hurdle. Now came the real test, moving £1 million worth of stolen cocaine without getting caught or killed. The gang scattered, switching vehicles and laying low. In a safe house in Warrington, they finally took stock of their haul. The sheer volume of product was staggering enough to flood the streets of Manchester for months. Caswell and Jason Cox exchanged glances. This wasn't just a score, it was a game changer. But criminals, even smart ones, have egos, and egos need validation. Within hours, the encrypted messages started flying. On EncroChat, the supposedly untraceable network trusted by dealers across Europe, the gang couldn't resist gloating. "Easy work," one message read, "like taking candy from a baby." Jason Cox went further. When a nervous associate warned him about the Liverpool firm's reputation for retaliation, his reply was chilling. "I don't give a fuck about them. I'll unload a clip in the old man's face, then he'll know what time it is." Every word, every boast, every reckless threat was being recorded. Because while the gang celebrated, French police had already cracked EncroChat's encryption. Operation Venetic, the UK's largest ever law enforcement operation, was silently intercepting thousands of criminals' messages, and the Cox crew's arrogance was making their job easy. Meanwhile, the Liverpool firm wasn't sitting idle. They had CCTV of the van used in the raid. They had footage of a grey Audi casing the stash house days earlier. And they had suspicions. A 2 a.m. call lit up Caswell's phone. A senior member of the Liverpool firm, voice tight with controlled fury. "We know it was someone we know. You hear anything, you tell us, fast." Caswell played dumb, but inside he knew the clock was ticking. The gang's next moves were reckless. Instead of laying low, they started planning another job, this time a kidnapping. The daughter of a rival dealer snatched off the street using a fake police car, held for a £2 million ransom. They mapped it out in detail, typing every step into EncroChat, oblivious to the fact that each message was another nail in their coffin. By the time police moved in, they didn't just have evidence of the robbery. They had the gang's next crime preemptively solved. All because they couldn't stop bragging. The encrypted messages kept coming, each one a gift to the investigators watching in silence. While the gang celebrated their £1 million score, law enforcement was assembling a case so airtight it would leave no room for escape. Operation Venetic, the UK's largest ever organised crime crackdown, had turned the criminals' own technology against them. It started with a single mistake. Benjamin Monk, the gang's courier, had dropped his face mask at the scene, a careless error that left his DNA splattered alongside the bloodstains in the Croxteth Road stash house. Forensic teams made the connection within days, but police held back. They had a bigger play in motion. The EncroChat messages told the whole story in real time. Detectives watched as Jason Cox directed his brother Lee to rent a safe house just in case. They read as Caswell boasted about the robbery to associates, then immediately switched to damage control when the Liverpool firm came asking questions. Most damning of all, they intercepted plans for the gang's next move. A brazen plot to kidnap a rival's daughter using a fake police car, a scheme so reckless it confirmed these men had completely lost touch with reality. This wasn't just about solving a crime, one investigator later remarked. It was like watching them dig their own graves, then hand us the shovels. The takedown came with military precision. Dawn raids hit multiple locations simultaneously. Caswell, still flush with cash from the heist, was arrested in his £1 million Chelsea apartment, surrounded by £98,000 in a holdall and a Rolex he'd bought to celebrate. The Cox brothers tried to flee to Spain but were run to ground in a chaotic car chase, smashing through traffic before armed units boxed them in. As officers cuffed Jason Cox, they found his EncroChat device still buzzing with new messages, unread alerts from associates who didn't yet know the game was over. The Liverpool firm, meanwhile, had already begun their own form of justice. Police discovered torched vehicles and firebombed properties linked to the gang, a clear message that prison might be the safest place for them now. In the end, Operation Venetic didn't just solve one robbery. It exposed an entire criminal ecosystem, from the arrogance of the thieves to the ruthlessness of those they'd crossed. The gang had been right about one thing: this was easy work, just not for them. The courtroom at Manchester Crown Court hummed with tension as the gang stood in the dock. Men who had once moved through the underworld with swagger, now reduced to shuffling in handcuffs. The lawyers' arguments faded into background noise. Everyone in the room knew the real stakes weren't just about prison time, but survival. The prosecution laid out the evidence with clinical precision. The DNA from Monk's discarded mask, the damning EncroChat logs, detailing everything from the initial robbery plot to the planned kidnapping, even the CCTV showing the grey Audi scouting the stash house. It was a prosecutor's dream case. The criminals had essentially built it for them. One by one, the sentences landed like hammer blows. Jason Cox, 14 years and 8 months. The architect of the robbery, his bravado in those encrypted messages now haunting him. Craig Cox, 13 years and 6 months. His loyalty to his brother sealing his fate. Richard Caswell, 7 years, a lighter sentence. But for a man with his violent history, prison was its own kind of battlefield. Benjamin Monk, 6 years and 9 months. The courier whose single mistake had helped unravel it all. The judge's words cut through the room. This wasn't just theft, it was a calculated attack on organized crime's most dangerous players, and you underestimated everyone, including the law. But as the cell doors clanged shut, a darker reality set in. Greater Manchester Police had already issued threat-to-life warnings to everyone connected to the case. The Liverpool firm didn't do lawsuits, they did revenge. Behind bars, the gang found themselves in a precarious dance. Caswell, ever the survivor, fought off attackers who slashed his neck in his cell. The Cox brothers were moved to segregated units, their names whispered in prison yards like curses. Even Monk, the lowest level player, kept his back to the wall. Meanwhile, on the outside, the fallout continued. Police surveillance caught known enforcers casing properties linked to the gang's families. A car parked outside Jason Cox's old address burned to the frame one night. No accelerant, just a message in the flames. Detectives monitoring the situation put it bluntly: these sentences aren't the end. For these men, prison is just the first fight of many. The irony was inescapable. They'd gambled for £1 million and lost everything: their freedom, their safety, even their futures. And as the courtroom emptied, one truth lingered like gunsmoke. In their world, the law wasn't the only thing that handed down life sentences. To his neighbors, Richard Caswell was just another quiet bloke, polite, unassuming, the kind who kept his head down. But behind that ordinary facade lurked a man who had spent most of his life navigating the darkest corners of Britain's criminal underworld. By the time he helped rob the Liverpool stash house, he was already a legend in the worst possible way. A man who had served a life sentence before he turned 30. Caswell's descent into violence began early. As a teenager, he worked as a glass collector in a pub, then as a doorman, jobs that exposed him to the fast money and brutal power struggles of the drug trade. By his early 20s, he had graduated from bouncer to enforcer, his reputation growing with each act of calculated brutality. Then came the bombings. In 2004, Caswell became embroiled in a bloody feud between a Liverpool nightclub owner and a network of drug dealers. His response was chillingly methodical. A campaign of car bombs that terrorized the city. One device detonated outside a police station in Chew Brook, sending shockwaves through the community. Another exploded outside the home of a woman linked to his enemies, her front door reduced to splinters. When police finally caught him in 2005, the evidence was overwhelming. Caswell was sentenced to 17 years, a lifetime for most. But for him, just another chapter. Behind bars, his reputation only grew. In 2011, he was caught in a vicious prison brawl that added 10 more months to his sentence. Guards learned to watch him closely. Inmates learned to avoid him. Yet even in confinement, he remained a player, his connections stretching beyond the walls. Upon release, Caswell didn't bother pretending to go straight. He slid back into the underworld, this time aligning with Jason Cox and his crew. His experience made him invaluable, a man who understood risk, loyalty, and most importantly, how to disappear bodies. But the past never stays buried. In February 2022, while awaiting trial for the Liverpool heist, attackers stormed Caswell's cell and slashed his neck. The wound wasn't fatal. Caswell had survived worse, but the message was clear: some debts don't expire. Now, with a fresh 7-year sentence hanging over him, Caswell faces his greatest challenge yet, outlasting the enemies he's made over a lifetime of violence. Police warn he'll forever be looking over his shoulder. For a man like Caswell, that's just another day at the office. The raid on the Liverpool stash house should have been a masterpiece of criminal planning, and for a brief, shining moment, it was. The gang had identified their target, exploited a weakness, and executed the robbery with military precision. They had the drugs, the connections to move them, and the arrogance to believe they were untouchable. But in the end, they forgot one golden rule: no one gets away clean. This wasn't some desperate, spur-of-the-moment crime. The Cox brothers, Caswell, and their crew were seasoned operators, men who understood the risks, and still rolled the dice. Their downfall wasn't due to a lack of skill, but something far more damning: complacency. They assumed EncroChat was secure. They assumed the Liverpool firm wouldn't figure it out. Most fatally, they assumed they were smarter than everyone else. And that's where the story twists. Because for all their mistakes, they almost made it. If not for the cracked encryption of EncroChat, if not for Monk's discarded mask, if not for their own loose lips on those encrypted messages, they might have vanished into the underworld with their £1 million score. But the criminal world doesn't forgive. Even now, with the gang locked away, the repercussions ripple outward. The Liverpool firm hasn't forgotten. Prison violence follows them. Retribution hangs in the air like a blade waiting to drop. And the police, they're watching it all, knowing that in this game, the players change, but the rules stay the same. The legacy of this heist isn't just about the robbery itself. It's about what it revealed: the illusion of invincibility. No matter how careful a criminal is, one slip is all it takes. The end of the untouchable era. EncroChat's collapse proved that even the most secure networks can fall. The price of arrogance. These men weren't reckless amateurs. They were professionals who got too confident. As the years pass, the Cox brothers, Caswell, and the others will eventually walk free, but the streets have long memories. And in the shadows, someone will be waiting. Because in their world, there's no such thing as a clean getaway.